and welcome to the Art of Decluttering podcast. I'm your host, Amy Revell. It is lovely to be with you on this lovely winter day in Melbourne, Australia. Wherever you are in the world, you might be in the middle of a scorching summer in the Southern Hemisphere, or you might be even colder than where I am in Melbourne and have snow or other weather. Don't know why I'm talking about weather. We are talking today around a stumbling block to organisation. And it's something I've really noticed coming back a lot from my team, talking about like, hey, I saw this client and they were really stuck on this. And what we identified is that lots of people have this special type of overwhelm that is caused by open loops in your mind. And so I want to explore what open loops are, what you can do about them, where they're helpful, where they're unhelpful. And hopefully what it does over the course of this episode is you can kind of identify some open loops in your mind, in your home, in your things, and you can remedy them. So you can maybe close the loop, you might shorten the loop, you might move the goalposts, and we'll go through some different options of how to do that. So open loops, if you haven't heard of this kind of concept of a loop, when it's open, is tasks that are mid-undertaking or halfway done, nearly finished, almost there, just got to get this final thing done. So it's like a task you've initiated, but you haven't finished. And so if you think of every task as having a start, a middle, and an end, it's not until you actually finish the task that you close the loop. And a closed loop really means you can kind of file it away in your mind. And open loops, I find, this is how my brain works, I find that an open loop is like this short-term or mid-term memory item that is hanging on by a thread often. And there's like 100 million of them all just kind of going, don't fall out of my memory. Don't let me forget you because I haven't quite finished that. And I think one of the huge barriers to organization is these open loops, because when you've got heaps and heaps and heaps of open loops, things are never done. You're never finished. And although I get like life, you don't just finish everything in life and one day you just turn around and go, I've got absolutely nothing I need to do. But what often is overwhelming for us is when we've got heaps and heaps and heaps of open loops. And the open loop actually stops us from taking progress, getting organized, decluttering, taking steps, living intentionally, like doing the things that we want to do. And so when it comes to organization, our clients often will identify open loops in a session. And one of the things we love doing is kind of helping them to close loops or change the goal of a loop. So a loop might be, I'm going to sell those items rather than donate it. So we often will go into a client's home and let's say they're in the study and they've got a box in the corner and it might have some Nerf guns in it. It might have an old, kids' PlayStation. It might have some kids' clothes, some snow gear. And they've kind of in their minds made the initial decision, I'm going to get rid of these. And the final, the closing of the loop is those items leave the house and they're gone. But our clients get stuck with the loop open. And that opening is, I just want to sell them. But they just don't do it. It literally will sit there for months and months and months. This open loop, every time you look at it. So I like to think of open loops. Every time there's an open loop, it's an opening for an emotion to sit there. And the emotion almost kind of keeps that loop open. And so what you might find is if the loop opening is, I want to sell that item rather than donate it, the longer that loop is open, you might then start to have guilt. I really should have done that by now. Or I can't believe I've wasted that money. Or why have I spent so much time doing other things? I can scroll online, I can, play around on Pinterest, but I can't seem to close the loop of selling those items. And so then you've not only got an open loop, but you've kind of got a stuck loop because it's now got emotion jarring it open. And so sometimes what you need to do is actually figure out where are the open loops in my world? Where are those things in my mind that things are open, I haven't quite finished it, and how do we close it? Another one is clothes that don't fit. So the loop often gets stuck on, I'm just going to try them on one last time before I donate them. Clients say this to us all the time. Usually our response to that is, go for it, let's do it right now. And so clients will often try their clothes on while we're there so that they can close the loop on each item. They don't have to keep trying them on and they can go, yep, that's it. I'm actually going to donate it. I'm getting rid of it. Craft projects. Oh my gosh, the loops that are open on craft projects that are half done is mind-boggling. What I find often creative people do is they'll start a craft project. Starting is usually the best bit. The doing in the middle is like sometimes can become a chore, sometimes you're still loving it. But if you don't close that loop, you're leaving open emotion again. And so you allow that emotion inside. And maybe the emotion might be, it's often guilt, isn't it? Like, oh, I should just finish that off. Or it might be just desire. I really want to finish that craft project off, but I just can't find the time to set aside, or I no longer have the passion for it. And so it might be disappointment. Oh, I spent money, I've spent time, and it's halfway done. It's actually now, it's not worth anything. I can't display it. I can't use it. I can't even donate it. Now I've just halfway through a craft project and the loop is stuck open. So another example of maybe some loops that might be open. In fact, some examples that like are in my head at the moment, I've got some donations in the back of my car from a client and I need to take those to the charity shop. So that's a loop in my mind. I keep thinking, oh, I've got to make sure I don't forget that. And that's what a loop does. It's like, oh, yes, don't forget that. Oh, make sure I do that. No. And it keeps taking up space, taking up brain waves. Whereas if I have, the minute I drop those donations off, I'm not going to think about them ever again. That loop will be closed and it can be archived in my mind. But currently, it's open and it's holding on to short-term, mid-term memory and constantly like waving a flag, don't forget me, don't forget me. Maybe you've got a text from a friend that they sent you a week or more ago and you've got this little open loop of, oh, I've got to reply to such and such. Maybe your kids have outgrown a school uniform and you need to buy a new one. So you've identified, you've started, okay, they need new school uniforms. You might have even had a look online or, written down what you need to buy or had a look at a buy, swap and sell. But until you actually get the new uniforms and get rid of the old ones, the loop is still open. Maybe you decided you were going to declutter board games. And so you started in the board game cupboard or wherever you keep them, and you only got partway through. So in your mind, the loop is stuck open on, I've got to finish going through the board games. So you can see that open loops look like a whole lot of different things, but it usually requires task finalization in order to close the loop. So I'm going to come back in just a second and tell you what you can do about open loops, because there's heaps you can do and what the benefits are of having those loops closed, because the benefits are actually enormous when you can close loops. And I want to help make it easy for you to close those loops as well. I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so what are we going to do about these open loops? Now, first off, the most obvious answer is you're going to close it. So you're going to do the tasks that completely finish it off, which include packing something up, filing it. Like you want to completely close that loop. The minute you close it, your brain just goes done and archives it, right? So you get like that instant relief. And also you get the benefit of having actually done the thing and you can move on and do other things in your world. So you can close it, and sometimes closing it might mean you want to get somebody else to help you, or you need to, reach out and find more information, or you might need to find a different creative way to solve the problem. Another way to close open loops is to just move the goalposts. And I find this super, super helpful because sometimes we open up like an enormous loop, like I was saying, like I'm going to go through all the board games. But actually the loop just needed to be, is there 2 board games in here I can donate today? And so sometimes instead of saying, I'm going to tidy my whole home office, which is a loop you're likely to have open for weeks, maybe you could reset the task to be like, I'm going to go through just the papers that are sitting on my desk. And so the task is still a loop. It still has a start, a middle, and an end. And you know when that task is completed, so you know when it's closed. But it's a smaller loop. And then once that loop's done, and that's out of your mind, you can actually start on a different loop. I'm just going to go through that top drawer and get rid of anything that doesn't work or I don't use. So you can close the loop by doing the exact things that you expected that you would need to do to close the loop, or just change the goalposts. So if the goalpost is I'm going to try on all my clothes, like that's the open loop is I really want to declutter my wardrobe, but I need to set aside time to try everything on. Maybe what you could do is say, Okay, all I'm going to do is go in and clothes that are 2 or more sizes smaller than what I'm currently wearing. I'm not even going to try those on. I'm actually just going to donate them. And so you're shifting the goalposts. You're saying, actually, it's a smaller loop. Now all I'm doing is finding clothes that are 2 sizes or smaller and I'm donating them, right? So you're changing what that is while still taking steps forward, because next time when you go to try on clothes, there's less to try on. And you might say, I'm going to get rid of clothes that are 2 sizes too big, or items like I just don't like wearing dresses anymore. I don't like wearing jeans anymore. I don't like wearing high heels anymore. Like actually giving yourself different parameters so that the loop can be closed quicker can be really, really helpful. And the benefits of closing these loops, like I hope that you're starting to think in your mind of like, oh yeah, I've got some open loops. Some things, like I'm just thinking off the top of my head, some loops that I am aware of that I've got open. Like one of them is I've just got some wood outside that we used for an open fire, like a backyard fire a little while ago, that actually just needs to be put under the deck because otherwise it's going to get wet, and then when we want to use it, it'll be too wet and we can't use it. So that's an open loop for me. We had the fire, we did the thing, we've packed up all the chairs from around it, we've tidied it up, but we just didn't move the logs that weren't used. So that in my mind is an open loop. So the really simple way to solve it is just either myself or get some help from a family member. Go, hey, let's just move, like it's probably 6 logs under the deck so they're not going to get wet. And so these little open loops, wherever they are, like sometimes it's helpful to write them down, and you can write down a to-do list that is just open loops. It might be that you need to return something to the shops, but you don't know what the postage requirements are, or if you need to fill in something, or if you have to pay for the postage or not. The simple step is like, okay, next step is I'm going to have a look on their website and see what their returns policy is. It'll probably tell me. So you're just like, what's the next little thing that I can do to close a loop? Because these open loops, you once you write it down, you might find that you actually have hundreds. And if you've got more children, if you've got a really complex medical or financial, or you've got really big business that you're running, or like every little component of your life has these loops. And you're opening loops every day. It's not like once you close loops, like you get freedom from loops. These loops actually happen all the time. Some of the loops that are really easy to close off, I find that like my kids are getting much better at this now that they're older, but making lunch opens a loop. So you're like, what do I want for lunch? Okay, I'm going to have a salad roll. And the salad rolls are the go in our house. Everybody loves a salad roll. So you get out a roll, then you get out all of the ingredients that you want to put in your roll. You get out a chopping board, you get out a knife, you get out the butter, you do all your things. And the loop might seem closed when the roll is being eaten. However, the loop also requires that the dishes get put in the dishwasher or in the sink, that the ingredients get put back in the fridge, and the bench is tidy. So you can see how a loop doesn't just stop when you've achieved just part of it. You actually need to close the whole loop. So the benefits of closing loops: closed loops foster creativity. Because when you actually have less of this chatter of open loops in your mind, you start to be a little bit more creative. And it might not be that you're going to, solve a massive problem in the world or start a new business or take up a new craft, but it might mean that you have a little bit of extra time to cook something really nice for dinner. It might mean that you get to catch up with a friend and you get to brainstorm with them about, a holiday we could take, or dream a little bit. Open loops just create a clarity in your mind where you can be creative and you can dream, and it's a really lovely space to be in where you feel less overwhelmed. Closed loops also foster rest. And part of the reason I was thinking about this is I've got an upcoming little surgery I've got to have, and I need to make sure that I've got time set aside to rest afterwards. And I know for me, the best way to have rest is to close some loops. So I'm thinking, a couple of weeks out, what business loops can I close? What kind of conversations have I been having that I can find a resolution to, or I can, pop back into the other person's court so that my loop is closed? What in the house open loops that I'm going to be thinking about while I'm lying in bed and can't get up and do things and going, that open loop is driving me crazy. It might be as simple as I know there's a busted globe in a bathroom. That is an open loop because I've seen the problem, I've started to think about it, and actually all I need to do is put a new bulb in or get someone to go buy a new bulb. And closed loops foster calm. They foster calm in your mind. They foster calm in your home. I find that when I have too many open loops open, I become a little bit barky at my family. Like, can you do this? Can you do that? Because I find it really stressful to have all these things done. And so sometimes it's time to go to bed. And I actually, every night before I go to bed, I close as many loops as I can. So I have a look at my to-do list. What can I just finish quickly and close off so that tomorrow I can start my day with less loops, so I have more creativity, so I feel calmer. I hope that you're kind of thinking and chugging through some ideas in your brain of what open loops look like for you and how they can really, once you start to either close them or reduce them or move the goalposts, it actually allows you to live a more organized life because you're not spending so much time juggling all these half-open loops that are trying to desperately hang on to your short-term memory. But it allows you to kind of go, okay, everything's under control. What do I want to do next? What do I want to tackle next? Who do I want to spend time with? How do I want to spend my time? And so like that simple job of identifying an open loop, maybe you need to identify what the emotion is that's kind of jarring it open and then close it. However you need to close it. Maybe it's donating things that you were otherwise going to sell. Maybe it's throwing a craft project out half done because you're not enjoying it anymore. I am notorious in my household for starting a puzzle, and when I've had enough, I just pack it up. I'm not someone who's going to leave a puzzle out for weeks thinking, I'm going to come back to it. I'm not. I just pack it up when I'm done. I will buy a little, standalone craft project, do 80% of it, go, I've had enough now. Close the loop, put the whole thing in the bin. Because the purpose wasn't that I had a finished product. The purpose was that I got to engage in the craft and have the beneficial outcomes of that. So close your loops, people. Close your loops. You're going to have creative time, you're going to be restful, you're going to be calm, and it is going to help you live more organized and decluttered. Until next time, enjoy the freedom. I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land this podcast is recorded on. I would also like to pay respects to their elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love you to rate and review the show on your podcast app. That will help others to find the Art of Decluttering podcast as well. If you'd like any more information, you can visit theartofdecluttering.com.au, and I would love to see you in my Facebook group. Just search the Art of Decluttering community on Facebook and join today. I hope that you have an incredible rest of your day and enjoy the freedom.